The negative impact of a taker typically exceeds the positive impact of a giver by a multiple of 2 or 3 to 1. You find that it's pretty easy for one taker to be the bad apple that spoils the barrel. But when you put one giver in an organization, it's not like one good egg will always make a dozen. I've spent a good chunk of time in the past year working with organizations on mechanisms for screening out takers. And I think what's powerful about that is if you can eliminate takers from your organization, then you have givers and matchers. The givers will act more generously because they don't have to be paranoid that takers are out to get them. And the beauty of matchers, which is most people, is that they tend to follow the norm and reciprocate the way that they've been treated. So matchers act like givers in the presence of givers. They're also useful for dealing with, if you have clients, for example, who are takers, matchers will actually fight fire with fire when they have to. So then the question is, how do you screen out takers? And there are a couple ways to think about this. One way to screen out takers is to recognize that they follow a pattern of kissing up, kicking down. If you're a taker, it's quite important to be a good faker when you're dealing with powerful people, because of course you want them to think well of you. But if you've never tried, it turns out to be a lot of work to pretend to care about every person you meet. And takers tend to let their guard down a little bit when dealing with peers and subordinates, which means that you should be really skeptical of references that come from bosses. And lateral and references from below are actually quite valuable. There's also evidence that takers, when they talk about success, tend to use 2 words more than the rest of us, which are I and me. And then when they talk about failures, they tend to place blame externally. And then my favorite way of screening out takers actually is to present them with situational interviews. A lot of organizations do behavioral interviews where they're backward looking and asking about your history, what you've accomplished, what challenges you've overcome. And those actually don't turn out to be very effective if you look at the evidence because they suffer from an apples and oranges problem. It's very hard to compare 2 people's work histories. Instead, what you want to do is you want to ask, what would you do in a situation like this? And give everybody the same situation. The problem is, no one wants to admit, I would be a taker here. But there's an easy way around this, which is instead of asking, what would you do? You ask people to predict what other people would do. Most of us tend to project our own motivations onto other people. So if you give me a scenario where it's not clear whether the appropriate behavior is giving, taking, or matching, lo and behold, what I'll tend to do when predicting others' behavior is ask, well, what would I do in this situation? And then you get my honest opinion. So integrity test research, for example, shows that the higher my estimate that other people will be thieves, the greater the odds that I myself am a thief.